Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of my podcast. I had to feature the man who has single-handedly vaulted my career into a place I would have never imagined. It is none other than Teddy Willsey. Welcome to the show, Teddy.
Thanks for having me on, Wesley.
Awesome. So we're going to hop right into things, and I'm also going to give you guys a little bit of backstory. I think some people might be interested in hearing how Teddy and I got connected, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But Teddy, do you mind telling us a little bit about your journey and your PT journey and how you got to Healthy Baller?
Yeah, of course. So I was a strength coach, a high school and private industry strength coach before I went to PT school. And I worked with a guy named Blair O'Donovan. And Blair's a co-founder of Healthy Baller. So Blair and I had been in contact like all the way through PT school and just kind of kept in touch. And when I was about a year out of PT school, I was working at a insurance-based physician-owned clinic. It was a pain clinic. I reached out to Blair about potentially coming over to Healthy Baller to start PT. I'd always kind of known that I wanted to do the cash PT thing and be in a gym setting. And so he was like, well, you could just kind of put a table over there if you want. And that's what I did. And so I put a table in the corner of the weight room. And that was my PT practice for the first year that I was at Healthy Baller. That was when we first met. That was that winter, and we got busy quickly. And it's a lot of the kids here and a lot of the parents here really kind of appreciated what we were bringing to the table from a physical therapy standpoint, and the model resonated with them. And I think a lot of them had experiences in other physical therapy offices that once they came to us, they really realized how different what we were doing was. And we were fortunate enough to grow to bring you on not long after that.
Yeah, and now we are with a third therapist. We have Alyssa, who started 5-6 months ago at this point, so we are slowly growing. And I think that a lot of people don't really recognize that you started with literally a table in the weight room about 10 feet away from a squat rack type of thing. And I think the first time I came to shadow Teddy, I didn't really know what to expect. I just walked into the facility and he walked me to the back, and sure enough, yep, it's just a single table there. And now I'm sure you guys have seen that we have our own office. It's not a massive office or anything like that, but it gets the job done. It allows us to do more private evals. And just thinking back, I couldn't even imagine what Teddy was dealing with, having to do an eval with a bunch of kids around, training and things like that, with maybe a parent there doing eval. And I still remember you told me a story about, I think you were doing eval, a girl literally passed out because she saw her foot for the first time after surgery, and her mom was there. And I couldn't imagine just going through that with having to deal with the I guess how much stimulus there is going on outside of that when you're trying to make sure this girl is okay and catching her and everything like that. But obviously now I'm sure you're a lot happier with our office that we have, that you made sure that we have built.
Yeah, the most challenging thing for me at that point was having a good kind of clinical conversation with the patient, and having, or really for both of us, allowing us to focus on each other and not on what was going on in the environment. We have so many kids in here, and you think of a 15-year-old kid. I'm sitting with my back to the weight room. I see their eyes darting. They're looking at everything. They're saying, oh, who's that? Who's that person, right? Who's that? And the last thing they're thinking about is me asking them, what challenges they're having in their life or whatever, because we like to have these deep conversations with our patients sometimes. And as much as having an office or a table out in the middle of the gym can be fun and can help you to be in that gym environment, I think it's also really important to be able to go into a closed door setting and have those difficult conversations sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the backstory about how Teddy and I got linked up. So I think some people are curious about how I got here. And Teddy said that he came here, he set up the table with Blair and everything like that. So he did all like the grunt work in the beginning. But for me, in the spring of 2017, I started my physical therapy Instagram as a way of kind of stepping outside of my comfort zone. At this time, I was still working at a more traditional outpatient clinic, much like Teddy was prior. I was working with a girl who had maxed out our facility. She was a post-op ACL. I believe she was 5 months at the time, and she was transitioning to something more. I was already following Teddy on Instagram at the time, and I referred her to go to him at Healthy Baller. He actually DM'd me, so yes, that's right, the famous Teddy slid into my DMs, and I'm gonna hold that to this day. So he DM'd me just asking for an update. You know, he's good clinician, understanding that he doesn't know what I did with her for 4 or 5 months, and he just wanted an update. At the time, I gave him an update, and then I asked him if I could just come in and shadow. And when I walked in for the first time, just seeing the 40-yard turf space, the equipment, all that kind of stuff, I was like, this is what it's like to really work with athletes. And then the first person I came back, Teddy was working with, I still remember, she was a hypermobile patient who still comes in here, she still trains here, which is awesome to see. And it was just such a weird and unique experience, the fact that Teddy was working with so many, I think I saw 4 patients that day, and it was just athlete, athlete, athlete. And then for me, I was like begging to have athletes. I'll be lucky to have 3 athletes the entire week, let alone in one day. And I knew this is the type of environment that I always wanted to be in. And I remember the first day, I don't know if Teddy remembers, but I jokingly said, if you're ever looking for another PT, I'd love for the opportunity to come work here. He kind of shrugged it off type of thing, but over the next several months, I just came in maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, just kind of developing that relationship with Teddy and just really trying to pick his brain, just wanting to learn about what it's like to work with athletes. In August of that year, I came into shadow again. He told me he was looking for another therapist. It caught me off guard. I wasn't really sure what he was telling me for. Like, are you rubbing in my face, or am I one of the candidates? He told me I was one of the 3 candidates he was considering. I went home. I remember I told my wife right away. I told my close friends right away, and they're like, "You have to figure out a way to get this job." And a couple weeks later, Teddy and I went to a Whole Foods. I remember exactly where we sat. We sat there. He kind of discussed with the logistics, what it would look like if I worked there and everything like that, the finances, all that kind of stuff. And I told him, I was like, if you're looking for a commitment, I'm ready. We shook hands right there, and that was it. I went into work, I believe that was a Friday, I think a Thursday or Friday. I went to work that following Monday. I gave him my 4 weeks notice, and I was out of there. I've been here since October of 2017, so it's been almost 2.5 years now, and it's been amazing. And I started this podcast by saying that Teddy single-handedly vaulted my career, because that's exactly what it is. And I think that hopefully for you guys, there is no one single path to getting to a sports rehab facility or whatever type of facility you want to get to. Teddy basically built it himself by developing a relationship. He had a relationship with Blair, and he was like, can I set up the table? But for me, I kind of hopped on to what Teddy had already established, and same thing with Alyssa for us too. So I think that at the end of the day, we want to encourage you guys that there is no one single way of doing things. If you want to make it happen, figure out how to make it happen, whether it's on your own or joining up with somebody like I did. So yeah, hopefully you guys learned a little bit from at least just the backstory from how Teddy and I got linked up. I think some of you guys might not know exactly the details, so hopefully that was at least somewhat entertaining for you guys. So we're gonna hop into some of the Instagram questions that we got. It ranges from PT education, also talks about benefits and negatives of cash-based PT facilities, and someone even asked an ACL question, so of course I had to get it on here for Teddy to answer as well. So we're gonna dive right into it. Teddy, is there something you would address in the current PT education system, and how do you feel like it can be improved upon?
Well, there's a lot of different answers, a lot of different directions that you could go with this question. But if I had to choose 2 specific areas of focus that I think PT education could be more robust in, number 1 would be communication. And pain science and these ideas that clinicians pass around about the other factors that weigh into how our patients experience pain and experience their injuries, all of that is getting clumped into communication, in my opinion. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is the relationship that we build with the patient. And I don't know how exactly you can implement this in school without it just being this boring communications class that you don't take seriously because you're worried about your neuroscience that you're studying for, or you're worried about your biomechanics and the communication exam is simple. It's really challenging. One of the best ways to potentially do that is just to set up mock scenarios where people can practice having these conversations and practice the communication. That's something that Greg Lehman does in his course, Reconciling Biomechanics with Pain. He creates, his labs are mock communications. They're not testing people's hips. It's a different part of PT, but arguably equally as important. And so I think number 1 is communication, because that applies whether you're in here and you're working with athletes and you're talking to them about this identity crisis that they've had when they've lost a year of their high school athletic career, Or you're in an inpatient setting and you're talking to somebody who maybe had a serious, a serious accident that's also going to change their life. The communication is so important across all populations of physical therapy. And the second piece is the obvious one, exercise and sports. There's a lot of physical therapists that do great work that they don't work with athletes. They're not working with high performers. They don't need to know what, ground reaction forces are, or they don't need to worry about rate of force development. But for us in here, that's extremely important. And Wesley, you think about the learning curve that you had in terms of learning strength and conditioning because you weren't taught that in school. And so oftentimes the people that excel in this sports PT are people like myself, who I had my CSCS for 4 years by the time I went to PT school. I had worked in those environments, but so I saw the importance of working that knowledge that I had, that baseline of how do we modify lunges to make the knee feel better or worse? How do we modify squat patterns? How do we cue our athletes to help them not shift? But none of that stuff's discussed in PT school. And I think a lot of professors would tell you that's what you learn on your clinicals. But not every student gets to come to a clinical here. Not every student gets to have that one. Now, I was very fortunate that I did, but not every student gets to have that one, influential clinical experience that they take with them forever. Sometimes your clinicals are a wash, and you end up not even learning the one main thing that you were interested about that drove you to apply to PT school in the first place.
Teddy talked about earlier about with ACL and power development and all that kind of stuff. And that's not just with ACLs, that's across the board with athletes in general. They are powerful beings. You need to rehab them the same way that they play. I think that's a big part of what we try to accomplish here, is that we are preparing you for your sport. We're not just trying to get you back into jogging or whatever it is, but understanding that we're seeing so many high-level athletes. We see college-level athletes, professional athletes in here. We're making sure that they're ready to go back, so that when they do go back, they're ready to go. There's no concerns about, oh, I think I'm ready. I'm not really sure if I can do that cut or whatever it is. They should have been prepared so well in PT that they're just ready to hit it and they're ready to go. And I think that's the biggest gap, because it's not really taught in school. I don't want to bash on programs or whatever it is, but I think at least for us in school, it was, let's say a shoulder patient, it was external rotation is a great exercise. I'm not arguing that, we use it, but the progression was always yellow band to the red band to the green band. There's no concept of time of attention, pauses. It's all these other things, all these other variables that I learned here that I use in my practice every single day. And I just wish that schools were able to teach that better. And a lot of that it goes far beyond just treating athletes, just treating even a rotator cuff repair for a 55-year-old, whatever it is. I think all this applies to, especially in the outpatient world, I would say, but I just think that it's something that definitely needs to improve upon. So I thought that was a really good question that our good friend Sal was able to ask us. So hopefully you guys are able to learn from the things that we just discussed about. And at the end of the day, if your school is not providing that for you and you want to work with athletes, find a way to learn it. Read a book, go shadow somebody. We have plenty of students coming to shadow us, and it's kind of an eye-opening experience in a way. So if your school is not providing for you, then figure out a way to learn it yourselves.
Yeah, and I will add, there are a lot of great young clinicians that are working hard to try to get this message into the schools and the programs more. People that are affiliated with Clinical Athlete, with Level Up Initiative, Barbell Medicine, like they're doing a good job. Of Eric Legoy, Zach Gabor, sometimes it might start with just one little guest lecture. I went and spoke at Columbia last year in New York. Tessia brought me up there and had communicated with her professors about it. But if you're a student and you're watching this or listening to this and you're thinking, man, I would love to have even like a guest lecture or even a Q&A with one of these kind of sports clinicians that I think is doing something I want to do, reach out to your professor that you think might be open to it. A lot of us would be ecstatic, at the idea of potentially talking to you guys. So there are a lot of ways that we can start to try to get this into the schools more, and the classes are developing, they're coming along, but they're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I also think social media has been kind of a game changer.
Absolutely.
Teddy and I are a little bit older, and I think when we were in PT school, Instagram was not really a thing in regards to the whole PT and health and fitness world, and now it's obviously everywhere. And I think that that's a big thing that Teddy and I try to use our platforms for is trying to educate anyone out there that there's a different world as far as like the sports rehab side of things, that this is what we believe it should look like. Not to say that we are doing everything 100% perfect, but we are trying to do things to the best of our ability. And I think that our Instagrams have enabled us to provide that level of education for people. So hopefully you guys continue to find other resources like that as far as improving your knowledge. That's going to lead us to the next question, Ted. It's going to be a little bit different, but what is one mistake in your career that you wish you could have changed?
Oh, man.
We're getting heavy, Ted.
Yeah, I know. That's a tough one. I think the biggest mistake for me might have been the degree of frustration that I had in school and my mindset in school and very early in my career. I went through school thinking, why the heck aren't we learning more about exercise? Why aren't we talking about this more? When I broke off into group projects and exercise, our Therex lab, I was the one teaching all my classmates, and I was very frustrated by it. But what I realized, and this is why I talked about a little bit earlier with the direction of school, what I realized is that the primary purpose of school is to get you through. It's to get you so that you can pass your boards. And secondarily, everything else is really different from program to program. What I was very fortunate to have in school was the education about communication. I had one specific professor that talked about this quite a bit. He was a no silly BS type of professor, which was very helpful for me in learning and properly placing what manual therapy does in, filing it away in my toolbox, so to speak, if we want to use that term, of knowing what I'm actually doing. But to circle back and answer the question, my biggest mistake was the degree of frustration. And I know a lot of you out there could be frustrated. The frustration is what kind of drove me to start this practice. So I did bottle up that energy and use it in a positive way eventually. Frustration was what drove you to come here, Wesley, and to a certain extent. A lot of us out there in the PT world are frustrated. Instead of being so frustrated, instead of falling into that mistake or that thought virus that a lot of us have, let's try to look at it from the positive end. PT hasn't been around very long. We've made a lot of progression in a short amount of time. We just recently standardized it to be a DPT in 2015, which was a blip ago, not very long. And we're moving in the right direction. So the biggest mistake that any of us can make, and the mistake that I did, was being frustrated and thinking that we can't change the system. The system is us, and we are the change. So every little piece, every little person that has 1,000 followers that's putting out good information, they have 17 people that are really engaged with what they're putting out. You don't have to have 500,000 followers to put out good information and change people's opinions on things or help them to see the light. So don't make that mistake of being frustrated. That's where I was, and I was almost disenfranchised before I even got out of PT school. I was like really questioning why I even went in the first place.
Yeah, I think my point of view is a little bit different. So Teddy is way smarter than I am, especially in the whole school realm. I was at the bottom of my class and everything like that, and I think I was just in survival mode in PT school, just trying to get through. But as far as like the graduation portion of it, I think I wish that I did a better job of diving a little bit deeper into selecting my first job. I took my first job with my last clinical. I just thought it was a smooth transition. You know, I did my clinical there. It was okay, and then I went from there. But as far as like the young clinicians goes, I wish I did a better job of finding a mentor and making sure that my first job provided me that. And unfortunately, my first and second job, they were higher volume places, and it's tough for higher volume places to have that one-on-one attention that a new clinician needs. And I think that's something that when I came here, Teddy and I set aside, you know, every week to 2 weeks, we would set aside an hour here, block off his time to teach me stuff. And even throughout the week, if I just had a random question about one of my patients or a specific exercise he was doing, I could just pull him aside and be like, hey Teddy, can you show me this? Can you explain this to me? And that mentorship has literally vaulted me to where I am today as far as like having a much better understanding of how to work with athletes and just making myself a better clinician. And on top of that, the mentorship that I've gotten from like the owner Matt's here and Wes, the coach, the strength coaches here, and Brad, like all these great coaches that we have here, they have, even though they're not PT specific, they have still taught me a lot about the sports world, which ends up being invaluable for the demographic that we're working with. And I think when we hired Alyssa, that was one of the big things that we told her, that between Teddy and I, we are going to set aside time for you. Literally this week, Teddy's meeting with her tomorrow, I meet with her on Friday. We have blocked off schedule because we are committed to helping Alyssa grow as a clinician. And I can't really stress that enough.
She's been here for 8 months too. It's not like she just started yesterday. We're still, the mentorship process continues.
Yeah, and I think that I think that a lot of new grads are so pressed about the finances, because, which is understandable. You get out of school with over 6 figures in loans, and it's tough not to think about that. But if you're thinking the big picture and not having a high burnout rate and all that kind of stuff, making sure that you are actually growing in the profession and learning, I think that'll grow so much more as far as the longevity of your career, and not just thinking about, I have to make whatever $75,000, $80,000 right out of school so that I can start paying off my loans. So hopefully that's two different perspectives between the frustrations or the things that Teddy and I would have wished we changed between whatever 4 years ago. We've been graduated for 5 years now. So people understand that we are in a cash-based facility. Do you mind your maybe 2 benefits and disadvantages of cash-based PT in your opinion?
I would say the biggest disadvantage, we'll start there, is the fact that we're cost prohibitive. I wish that the insurance industry was in a place where we could easily and, you know, in a pain-free manner start a PT practice, bill insurance, and not have to give 10% of those earnings over to somebody to simply fight the insurances for us, not have to wait 6 months to actually earn a profit because the insurances won't certify you for that long. The biggest challenge for me for cash PT is that I don't like being expensive, and for that reason we're the cheapest cash PT place around. You know, our goal is not to become, you know, millionaires off of being cash PTs. Our goal is just to treat people the way that we want to treat them, in a manner that we can see the best clinical outcomes. So that takes me to the biggest benefit, the fact that we have full control over what we do with our patients. We don't have to worry about medical necessity. We don't have to worry about their insurance authorizing the visit. We don't have to worry about trying to squeeze in as much as we can in 20 minutes or 25 minutes to then hand them off to a tech who just started last week when they got home from college and they don't know any exercises, and that's literally your life's work. So that was the biggest challenge for me as a former strength coach, trying to get my techs to just teaching them what an isometric hold was before I handed my patient to them. It was like, I couldn't believe it. And so I think that the biggest disadvantage is it kind of comes along with the biggest advantage, and unfortunately it's a socioeconomic status type of thing where it's, yes, cash PT can work in places where the population maybe doesn't have quite as much money. You price yourselves accordingly, but there are a lot of people that miss out on good quality PT care because they can't afford to come to a place like us, and that's always frustrating to me. Something I think about a lot in terms of how maybe down the road we can, if you expand to an even larger practice, you can afford to take people on for less money and that sort of thing. But yeah, those are the two big things I think about.
Yeah, and I think on my end, the biggest benefit is that it allows you the flexibility to not only treat the way that you want to treat. So we see every patient for an hour one-on-one. We don't have techs here. I just think we've learned that TheraX is the most important part of what we do. It's the part that we can teach people on so they can do it at home. And that's unfortunately the part that typically gets passed on. Where I used to work, a lot of it was heavy manual for 20 some minutes, and then you pass it on to a tech for the TheraX portion for 20, 40, 30 minutes, whatever it is. But for us, it's just, we're there with them the entire hour. They can ask any questions, we can check their forms and all that kind of stuff. It's invaluable, and I think that it allows us to build stronger relationships with these people. And between Teddy and I, we work with two different demographics, or most of the time, but at least for me, I see so many ACLs that it's really important for me to develop that rapport as quickly as possible, just given the magnitude of the injury. So I'll say it's one benefit. The other big benefit is that because we're in cash base, we basically have the flexibility to do whatever we want outside of it. And like Teddy's got a Citizens Athletic, which I don't think you would have done at a more traditional model. And for me, I had my ACL mastermind group, so it's a lot more entrepreneur, but you can do stuff that you're really passionate about. Like Teddy loves strength training, so now he gets to do the PT thing while he's at Healthy Baller, but also the training thing when he's doing Citizens Athletic. And I just think that those are two huge benefits as far as the cash based. And I think the disadvantages that people don't really recognize is the fact that most places can't really offer you benefits. So we don't have the traditional benefits of a 401k, health benefits, all that kind of stuff. It's all conscious decisions that we made to join this facility and be in this type of setting because of what we believe on the PT side of things. And I would never take any of that back. Like, yes, would it be nice to have health insurance? And yes, that would be great. But luckily my wife has health insurance, so that's definitely a benefit. But the 401k thing, that's probably the biggest disadvantage. But at the end of the day, if I'm way happier doing what I love, then it's all that extra, whatever that 3% match is not really gonna matter in the long run. I'll take being happier over that any day. And Teddy, that kind of leads us to the next question, but what would you say is the most challenging part about growing a cash-based clinic?
I think the challenging part is that it's a true business entrepreneurial venture, and it's not just physical therapy practice. If all you want to do is see people one-on-one for an hour and that's what you think cash PT is, and you don't realize the business that goes into it, then you're in for a rude awakening, and it might not be the right setting for you, because you have to really try to talk to your patients about trying to get word of mouth. Talk to them about, hey, could I come talk to your team? Can I network with your coach? Can I, all of these things you're trying to get your foot in the door. There are cash PTs that are going to running clinics on the weekend to go talk to them. These are the same things that maybe one person or two people are in charge of at some big insurance practice that has multiple locations. Whereas if you're a cash PT, you're out on your lonesome and you gotta kind of do it yourself. Now, you can grow to a point where word of mouth and the work that you've done thus far can feed a lot of what you do. You don't have to do the same things to get there, to stay there as you did to get there. But there are a lot of business challenges. I was just on vacation last week and I spoke with my accountant multiple times because they messed up my taxes from 2018. And being a business owner, my taxes are multiple business owner, my taxes are far more complex than they would be if I just had a W-2. And so there are so many stupid little back of the house things that you have to deal with being a cash PT that you just never even consider when you show up and you have your caseload for the day.
Yeah, I think that it kind of really coincides with the last question about the disadvantages. And we don't have I would say it is a big privilege to have surgeons who own the facility, and they do their surgeries or whatever it is, and then they send them down to their own PT clinics. At least for our area, that's a lot of the PT clinics in this area where they're owned by surgeons, and we don't have that privilege in a sense. I think that Teddy's been here for 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years, and I've been here for 2.5 years. So now it's taken us years to build this quote unquote name for ourselves, and now it's a lot easier in a sense because the word of mouth has gotten there, but it took years and years of work and a lot of communication with parents and coaches and doctors. And now I believe we have 3 doctors now who actually really appreciate the sports side of rehab that we do, who will send us specific patients who they believe that we would work better for. And I think that's a challenge that not many people see. And like you said, it's the business side of things. And Teddy sat me down 4 months, something like that, after I started working, and he basically told me that I need to do more. I think that I was trying to coast off of Teddy in a way and thought that things would be spoon-fed to me in a cash base, and that's definitely not the case. And it's a conversation that we have with Alyssa when she first started here, is that we can give you as many as appropriate, but there are people who seek out Teddy, who maybe will seek out me for ACL rehab. So developing that niche for yourself is super important. And I think I don't know, at least maybe more you than Teddy, but I think that people think that you have X amount of followers, so everything is just given to you, and people are flooding through, waiting at the door for you to see you and stuff. But that's not really the case. And when I first started here, both Teddy and I went through this little slow period, and I think that's when Teddy had that conversation with me. It's you got to help me grow this thing. So I started just networking, trying to talk with coaches and parents and things like that, stuff that people don't really see. And at the end of the day, between Teddy and I, we're both working 7 days a week right now, whether it's responding to emails, doing the whole Instagram thing, the side businesses that we have. We are literally working 7 days a week, and it's stuff that people don't really see. And we just had dinner over the weekend with both of our wives, and Alyssa and Drew also. And Teddy's wife, Louisa, looked at me and she was like, all right, do you have trouble balancing the whole work-life balance? And I looked at my wife because she gave me a look. It's hard. It's very, very hard to figure out that balance between you're trying to grow this business, but also be a human at the same time. So I think that's a very big challenge. And like you said, it's not for everybody. I think that it's I don't even know how to explain it, to be honest. It's just a lot of work, but when you love it, which I think both of us do, it doesn't really feel like work necessarily all the time. And yes, there are good days and bad days, but in general, you're just trying to grow this thing because you're so passionate about the field. And I think both of us are passionate about this field and the services that we're able to provide here. So hopefully at least that sheds some light on the whole cash-based world, which I know that a lot of you guys are intrigued about.
Another interesting, so Wesley, you mentioned that there's not people lined up outside our clinic knocking down the door to get to see me. When I pushed my physical therapy practice more on Instagram, when I was trying to get busier, I definitely fed more patients here. But now I just kind of get patients organically. As recently as yesterday, I had a phone conversation with somebody where they asked me if I knew how to work with a tennis player. So I get humbled every day by people that have no idea my passion and dedication to the field. They don't know my background. They don't know anything about me. They're just patients that somebody suggested for them to come see me, and maybe they didn't type my name into Google yet or whatnot. And I have to have an honest and forthright conversation with them. I can't just be like, look lady, I worked with a top 300 tennis player for 2 years. I've seen, I can't just list off my credentials and I teach this and that. They probably wouldn't even want to come see me. I just sound like a whatever. And so I think with Cash PT, you have to be very willing and comfortable with selling yourself and having those tough conversations with people over and over and over again, and explaining to them why you have this extra cost associated with what you're doing too.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of struggles, but it's at the end of the day, it's worth it. I don't think Teddy and I or Alyssa would change anything about what we're doing right now. It's a good grind, I would say. That's probably the best words for it.
And I'm gonna add one thing here just to totally mess up Wesley and his timeline. He's like, you got through 2 questions in an hour, but it hasn't been an hour. But one piece of advice and one thing that I thought so hard about before I came to Healthy Baller and reconnected with Blair and Matt was my advice is don't try to do it all yourself. Don't try to do it alone. if I had holed up in an office building and opened a little one-person cash practice in an 800 square foot room, I'd probably be surviving. I like to think that I would be, but I definitely wouldn't be working with Wesley. I definitely wouldn't have Alyssa here. I definitely wouldn't be in this environment with all these other great coworkers and people that I look forward to coming and seeing. And Wesley and I benefit tremendously from being in this gym and having this relationship with these coaches. There's no way we could have developed this strong of a relationship with this many different coaches and referral sources, if we want to talk about it from a business standpoint, if we weren't here. But we're proud to say these people are our friends. They're people that we, have lots of good conversations with outside of just the work topics. And if you want to try to do the cash PT thing, don't try to do it all yourself. I really think it's extremely important to get in with a group of people. And if you're a PT, you can learn a lot from strength coaches. Just because they didn't spend those extra years in school, they might have spent those extra years learning about being a strength coach. So they have a lot to offer.
Yeah, 100%. And just to flip away from the cash questions, this is another hard question, but Teddy, what would you say is the most challenging case you've ever had?
Well, I will say that I knew this question was coming, so I got to think about it for a second, but I got to shout out my girl Caroline, probably. I won't say her last name. I don't know if that's a HIPAA thing or not that she would care. So she's a D1 soccer player, and she first came to me at the end of her sophomore year of high school with a navicular stress fracture, something that you don't see very often. She was in a boot for 4 to 6 weeks before she'd ever seen me. Then she got out of the boot, it got bad again, then she went back into a boot. Then she ended up having it pinned. She was then in a cast for 6 weeks. So I saw this girl who, her leg had been in either a boot or a cast for 3 of the past 4 months. You can imagine the atrophy. And we rehabbed her, she came back, she played her junior year. She played, I went and saw her play, she did great. In February of her junior year, she tore her ACL. That leg was still not up to snuff. It was a lot stronger, but it was, she was recovering from 3 months of immobilization, and that can take a year or two to really get all the way back up to strength. Caroline tore her ACL. She had a posterior lateral corner injury, which is essentially, it's most commonly seen with hyperextension of the knee. I had the fortunate experience of being able to examine her before she had surgery. She had 45 degrees of hyperextension of her knee. So she tore her LCL, her lateral meniscus, and her ACL. And this was not a non-contact injury. She was in contact with the defender. She was playing wing, and she's a bull. She plays attack. She goes hard. She has no fear. And anyways, she tears her ACL. She works with her surgeon's Dr. Robin West, who's the head surgeon for the Redskins, and it was a complex case, which is why they went to go see this kind of world-renowned or highly renowned surgeon. And she had to be in an immobilizer for 6 weeks because of that posterior lateral corner injury and the hyperextension of her knee. We needed her joint capsule to scar down, and during that time, she had some of the most gnarly quad inhibition that Wesley and I have ever seen. She couldn't do a straight leg raise. She couldn't do a short arc quad for a matter of weeks. And she had a lot of inhibition and kinesiophobia to even putting her foot on the ground. She was supposed to be toe touch weight bearing and then work her way back into weight bearing, but she wouldn't put her foot on the ground. It was one of those really challenging cases where an athlete felt defeated, and they felt like, will my leg ever be normal again? And so Wesley and I worked together with her, and we tried a lot of different things. And long story short, she's playing soccer now, and she had a full recovery, but we didn't clear her for contact practice until 14 months post-op, and we didn't clear her for competition until 16 months post-op. So that was a very long case. And ACLs like that can be extremely challenging. They don't fall into the insurance 24 visits or whatever insurances like to allow. And you're also talking to the parents and the kid the whole time and trying to tell them, hey, look, trust the process. You got to stick with this. I understand this is challenging financially for you. I understand this is challenging logistically for you to get your kid here, but this is what has to happen. There are professional athletes that don't come back a year after their ACL. You know, Carson Wentz took over a year and he still wasn't right. That whole first season he came back after his ACL. Whereas Adrian Peterson came back 5 months. So you can't look at every single athlete and say, hey, this is, you know, and chances are your kid is not going to be Adrian Peterson or Carson Wentz. So that was the most challenging case for me, and it really highlighted everything from the beginning of the principles of muscle inhibition and facilitation all the way to the careful return to sport planning and having her keep a log and a calendar. And you know, she struggled a lot with anterior knee pain in the 9 to 12 month point. We worked a lot on load management, and she learned how to track her RPEs with her runs, and there were so many dimensions to that case from the beginning to the end, and it was great. And I've went to see her play in college, and you know, fingers crossed she just continues to get the same type of training and focus on her knee to keep it as strong as possible, because it still hasn't even been 2 years.
Yeah, and before I dive into my most challenging case, I think that's one of the biggest thing I talk about the most through my social media is the fact that there is no one size fits all for ACL rehab. It is a very, very challenging injury to overcome. And I think Teddy and I sometimes talk about it is, what if Caroline ended up at a more traditional place and more with insurance kind of stuff? They would have cut her off at X amount of visits, and they probably would have been like, you can do it on your own or whatever it is. And I think that's the one that sticks out to me the most because of how challenging her recovery was. And for all of us here, we see her, but Caroline is one of the fastest girls to ever step foot in this door. Very, very explosive athlete. She'll race against anyone. Doesn't matter if it's a guy or a girl, and she will most likely beat you. That's how explosive she is as a person. So we knew that we had to get her back to that level before even thinking about clearing her to go back, which is why we had to make sure we're doing our diligence of, you know, making sure she's strong enough and explosive enough and all these things. That's why we waited 16 months. She didn't love it, but I think she had a strong relationship with Teddy, and she understood that Teddy was doing what was best for her and the longevity of her career, because she still has 3 more years to play. So I think that we try to make sure we do things the right way. And at least from my end, mine was a hypermobile patient. It was one of my earlier ones when I started working here, but she walked in the door. I eval'd her the first day, and I asked her what was wrong with her shoulder. She said she always felt like it slid on her all the time. And I was like, okay. I was like, I've dealt with subluxations before and stuff. And I was like, what makes it slide? And she said walking. And then that was like an eye-opening experience. And she said just swinging her arms with walking, her shoulders would slide in and out, and she would feel it essentially every single day. So I knew from the get-go that it was going to be a challenging experience and the rehab process would be long. And I always try to be very honest with the patient and the parents, just because, especially because we're cash-based, they're going to be paying for it. So I think it was probably 2-3 months, and I was trying everything. I was doing every shoulder exercise I could possibly think of. I was asking Teddy for exercises, looking up exercises, and she kept telling me the same thing. She was just like, it's still sliding, it's still sliding. And it got to the point, I was very, very close to telling her that maybe she should go somewhere else, because I just felt like I wasn't doing what was right by her. And miraculously, one week she came in and she was like, my shoulder stopped sliding. And I was like, what did you say to me? And she said, my shoulder has been sliding a lot less. And I was just like, that's awesome. So we just kept working at it. And the worst part was later, I think it was during the school year, second semester, and she went away for the summertime, and then she's like, I'm gonna get a job. I was like, okay, that's cool. And I still remember this stuck out so much, and Teddy's laughing already. It's because I was like, what are you gonna do? She's like, I'm gonna scoop ice cream. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, there's thousands of other jobs you could do, but she chose to scoop ice cream. But I think to a certain extent, I was kind of glad in a sense, because that means that she trusted her shoulder enough to do that. But that was definitely one of my more challenging cases, because it literally got to the point where I was wondering if I was even doing right by this girl. And thankfully she was able to get back, and she still plays lacrosse and she plays soccer, tough as nails. She'll go in there and throw her shoulder around, no problem. It's still, periodically she still trains here, so it still slides on her every once in a while because she's hypermobile. But at the same time, she understands the exercises that she should be doing to keep her shoulder strong. So at least for me, that's one of the more challenging cases that sticks out to me. So just because we love ACLs, and you just talked about your case, Teddy, Can you give a few of your tips to help decrease second ACL tears, which we know nowadays is 1 in every 4 to 5 kids. So 20 to 25% of athletes are either tearing the same side or they're tearing the other side.
Yeah, I think the first tip starts with how you initiate the rehab process. It's important to set the rules and have these tough conversations early so that you don't catch people by surprise down the road. You know, most of your patients are going to come to you with the number that their surgeon told them, 5 months, 6 months. We'd be lucky if surgeon ever said 7 months. The reality is it's usually more like 9 to 10 at a minimum. But to set the groundwork early and to establish that relationship and tell them what you're looking for when you're going to clear them. You know, don't just have them, make sure that they know what the goal is. Don't just have them moving towards this target that they think is a date. Make sure that they know that the target is an objective set of measures and there's no wiggle room there. There's no subjectivity. You need to have those measures. And that kind of brings me to the second point, which is have a defined set of measures that you're using to clear your ACLs to the best of your clinical ability. Are we perfect at it all the time? No. Are our measurements not always as valid or reliable as we wish they would be? No. Or of course they're not. And then lastly, there are a lot of tests that people can cheat. You know, you think about the triple hop, that can be done with a more knee shielding and hip dominant movement. That can be done with more ankle action. So we need to have a battery of tests to look at different strength qualities and different types of movement, because they can usually fool you on one or two, but it's hard for them to fool you on all of them.
Yeah. So Teddy just stole all my thunder. But I 1,000% agree with everything Teddy just said. There needs to be a battery of tests. And in addition to what Teddy just said with the strength testing and the hop testing, these are objective tests that, you know, they're meant to give you specific numbers so you're not guessing. There's the cliche of saying test, don't guess, and that's very much applies to ACL rehab. And I think another big component that's not really looked at enough is the psychological side. And for us here, we give our athletes the ACL RSI, which is a 12 questionnaire, just asking about, you know, it'll ask you stuff like how confident are you in your knee, and it makes them rate on a scale of 0 to 100. It's a 10-point scale. But I think that's a quote-unquote subtle thing, but I think it makes a world of difference because it lets you know where they're at. And I think what Teddy said earlier about making sure you are honest with them, letting them know that at the end of the day, if you hop a little less for the hop test or you don't answer these questions correctly to what you actually believe, then they're only hurting themselves. So I think for us, establishing that relationship, letting us know that at the end of the day, we are on their team. We are trying to make sure they are safe to go back, and not to scare them by any means, but if you talk to your athletes, they probably know at least one other person that has suffered more than one tear. And that just gives them some perspective about why we are so careful about these tests and why we are so diligent with doing these and making sure they pass these, because we care about them not re-tearing. We don't want to see, I tell my kids all the time, like, I don't want to see you again for your ACL. Like, if you have a minor ankle sprain, whatever it is, that's fine. But like, I don't want to see you for your ACL tear ever again. And overall, you know, knock on wood, but as a facility, we're batting a much better percentage than the industry norm of that 20 to 25% re-tear rates. I think between the three of us, like, we've only had maybe 2 or 3 re-tears. 2 of them were contact ones, which are much harder to predict. But I think we're trying to do a much better job of making sure that we are testing
opposite knees too.
Yeah, and we're trying to just test every single kid up the wazoo to make sure that they are safe to go back. You know, it's not fun, and I make sure my kids pass it multiple times. It's not just about passing it once, because they can have good days and bad days, and I think it's important to test as much as you possibly can. And even for us, we don't have a fancy Biodex machine. We don't have $30,000-$40,000 to spend on that piece of equipment, but we have a force plate here, which is significantly cheaper. We have the Kaiser, which measures power output. We have handheld dynamometers. We have obviously the field to do the hop test. There's so many different ways to do it and not have to have that fancy $30,000-$40,000 piece of equipment, because they are hard to access. I think I even tried to find one locally, and it's very, very hard to find. So I think just reiterating what Teddy said, making sure that you are doing a battery of testing in addition to the psychological testing. Those are kind of the big things that would help to significantly help decrease second ACL tears.
Yeah, and the last thing I will add is the return to sport process needs to be aggressive, and it needs to mimic what their actual sport demands are.
Yeah.
And so you need to get athletes all the way back. Them performing for 3 different tests over a 10-minute period is a lot different than playing a 3-hour game, or if they're a high school athlete, playing 3 of those in a weekend for a tournament.
Yeah.
You know, so many of our injuries, so many of our ACLs that we see happen at these tournaments, at these weekend events. And high school athletics are not well organized, and they're actually more demanding on these kids than college oftentimes, because they're year round and they have these idiotic 3 and 4 game tournaments with these kids that they don't practice with, and in field conditions. Do you imagine what the fields look like after all that play? So they need to be prepared for that, and it oftentimes takes a lot more work than just the initial rehab process.
Yeah, and there has to be definitely a gradual return to sport. I think that's very big. I think Teddy and I are very structured. We make sure we give them clear-cut numbers. So I have a girl right now who's about to go back to playing basketball. She's 9.5, 10 months out. They started her at contact practices. So her surgeon made her do 10 contact practices before going back, which I actually really appreciated. And she's about to hit 10, so her first game is next week. And I told her that she has 8-minute quarters, so that's 32 minutes. And I told her that I want her to start with 2 minutes a quarter, and I want her to do at least 2 games at that, and just see how she feels. At the end of the day, I'd rather be a little bit conservative than to have her just be like, hey, go out there and play. And she's a starter. She's supposed to be playing, probably 30 some minutes a game. But I told her, you're going to go 2 minutes of actual game time per quarter. So you're doing 8 minutes, and just see how you feel. If you feel really good, cool, do it one more time, and then we'll start increasing from 2 minutes to 3 minutes a quarter. If you think about it, that's a 50% increase. It's a big increase for the body to handle. So making sure you're gradually reintroducing that is really important. I think that also gradually exposing them also helps with the confidence level, which I think is so important. No matter what, no matter how hard you push them, and we push our kids hard here, you cannot replicate the intensity and the speed of a game. That's something that can only be done in live action. So I think that the gradual return to sport is definitely very important. As I'm sure you guys are all aware, I can definitely talk ACL rehab for forever, but hopefully that at least sheds some light about the return to sport process that we implement here. So Teddy, I definitely appreciate you coming on the show. And do you mind giving us just a little bit of plugs about maybe your social media for those who don't know, and maybe your website, and maybe Citizens as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, it was great to be on. I was excited when you told me you were starting this podcast.
Appreciate it.
My Instagram is StrengthCoachTherapy. StrengthCoachTherapy, it's all one word. And I also am a part runner of Citizen Athletics 1, which is our other Instagram, Citizen Athletics, and then just the number 1 at the end there. And Citizen Athletics is a training company. We do 4-week training blocks, so it's programming, and you have access to our app, and you have video support for all the exercises, and it's just a well put together training plan. If you're looking for a little bit of structure, and maybe you're in the industry and you want to just learn some new exercises and see some different things, I think it's a worthwhile product, worthwhile thing to sign up for a little bit. Wesley has a coach here doing programming for him. I have a coach that's done programming for me. I do programming for other people that know how to do it. And a lot of us in this industry, we get kind of burnt out with training other people, and it's nice to just kind of have some stuff done for us. And so that's what I do with Citizen Athletics.
Cool. So definitely check out Teddy's stuff. He has a lot of content on his social media and also on his website. So hopefully you guys can go out and support him as well. So definitely appreciate you coming on, Teddy, and hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you for watching today's video. Please feel free to like and subscribe and share it on your social media platforms. If you're interested, I have started an ACL Mastermind group, which is a growing library of content centered around ACL rehab. It has exercises ranging from immediate post-op to late-stage sports-specific movements and everything in between.
is a growing library and currently holds over 250 videos. There's content centered around assessments, movement breakdowns, exercise breakdowns, case studies, and a whole lot more. You also gain access to a private forum where you can engage with like-minded people, ask questions, share research articles, and share resources. If you're interested, please feel free to click the link below. Thank you for watching.